shadow.
If this finds you at night, consider joining the circle. Subscribe, leave a mark, and we'll keep the light low while the curtain parts. Tonight, we open a ledger that was never meant to be read, its pages brittle with secrets that have aged like wine in a cellar where no light falls. You will hear names that have been said too often in rooms with no windows, words that carry the weight of ancient blasphemies and cosmic indifference. You will be told how they gathered by the marsh, under the church, beneath the stage of human understanding, and what they believed would answer when the mask finally turned its face their way. The promise is simple and heavy. We will show who knelt to Lovecraft's gods and why their kneeling did not end when their bodies did. The cost is equally simple. Once you recognize the signs, you will see them again, and they will notice that you noticed. The question sounds deceptively like history. Who were the cults that worshipped Lovecraft's gods? Not the dates and dust alone, not the pulp covers and clipped headlines that first brought these narratives into flickering lamplight, but the people themselves, their habits, their motivations, the slow, salt-stiffed pages of their lives. A cult is not merely an altar and a chant, not simply a collection of individuals performing strange rites. It is a pattern that repeats wherever a signal gets strong enough, a cosmic frequency finding its human receivers. The trick and the inherent danger lies in learning to recognize the shape of this pattern without letting it recognize you back, without allowing its logic to reconfigure your own perception of reality. You think you are the observer, then the idea observes you back. That is the flip, the key, and the gate. We begin at the edge of water, as so many of these dark chronicles do. The swamp remembers footsteps nobody else does, its black surface reflecting stars that seem too bright, too numerous. Lanterns hum in the fog like dying insects, and drums pace with a rhythm that echoes a heart too big for its chest, a primal beat that predates human language. In New Orleans, in 1908, a police inspector named Legrasse stumbled upon such a gathering, seizing a small idol from a ring of celebrants deep in the cypress dark. The idol was slick with handling, carved from stone the color of drowned limes, its morphology blasphemously oceanic, yet absurdly terrestrial. The name of the inspector, Legrasse, enters our ledger like a bookmark stained with bayou mud, a first tangible anchor in this shifting sea of belief. In the Pacific, sailors traded stories about a cyclopean stone city that rose from the depths when the tide forgot itself, its angles impossible, its silence profound. On a crumbling farm in Massachusetts, a family read from a book that called its reader both key and gate to realities best left undisturbed. In Providence, a church boarded its windows, then learned a way to make the dark brighter than the sun. These are not isolated vignettes, disconnected fragments of fiction. They are pages in one book, bound by an unseen thread, inked by a shared terrible truth. Trace the strokes, and you will find the same letters recurring, the same shapes etched by different hands across continents and centuries, a star that refuses to resolve into any familiar constellation, its geometry hinting at dimensions beyond human grasp, syllables whose vowels taste of salt and copper, a sigil that drapes across the mind like wet membrane, thin and permeable. Listen long enough, and the swamp drums keep time with a generator's hum in a boarded steeple, which matches the footfall of someone crossing an attic after midnight. Ideas rhyme across distance. The wind carries the chorus. The sea keeps the beat. If you are listening, truly listening, you are already participating. The congregations we will encounter organize not around charismatic leaders or fixed doctrine, but around an idea that behaves like weather. You cannot negotiate with it. You can only shelter or align. They recruit not by pamphlet, but by resonance, by a subtle shift in perception that draws individuals toward the broadcast. A dream repeats. A mask fits better than your own face. A word you never learned arrives on your tongue and refuses to leave. They are antennae as much as congregations, bodies arranged to catch transmissions that never stop. They convene at the waterline between waking and dream, between rational daylight and the hush that settles when an audience shares a held breath, when the stage light softens, when the curtain waits, already moving in the mind. The recruitment follows patterns older than organized religion, operating through what intelligence agencies would recognize as contamination rather than conversion. The academic who studies these groups too closely begins noticing synchronicities. The journalist investigating cult activities starts having dreams about underwater cities. The police officer who raids midnight gatherings finds themselves humming melodies they cannot identify, drawn to bedroom windows during hours when most people sleep, staring at star patterns that shift when observed directly. This is how the pattern propagates, through exposure to ideas that replicate across susceptible minds like a slow poison that tastes like wisdom. You may think you are only listening, but listening is participation. Your breath slows at the mention of fog. Your skin tightens at the sound of water under boards. Your eyes check the window for stars that do not belong. The ledger lies open, its first entry waiting in the bayou where drums still beat their patient rhythm. If they have already matched your pulse, you'll keep time across every chapter to come. Before there were masks and drums, before the swamp circles and boarded churches, there were letters moving along rail lines like discrete reliquaries. The pulp era was fundamentally a postal ritual. Envelopes crossing the continent carrying more than ink and paper. They carried fragments of a cosmology that seemed discovered rather than invented, assembled in increments like archaeological findings. The actual origin moves backward and outward along this web of correspondence, where ideas acquired weight through repetition, where the same phrase returned in different handwriting and began to act like scripture. Imagine a desk lit by a single bulb in the small hours when rational thought grows thin. The page carries the heat of the hand that just folded it, ink still faintly wet from fountain pens that scratched across paper with the urgency of revelation. The names on these pages, Lovecraft, Smith, Howard, Derleth, Barlow, function less as a pantheon of authors than as a choir harmonizing around themes too vast for individual comprehension. They pass phrases between them that are not Latin, yet feel older than human language, syllables that taste of deep water and forgotten time. They plant proper nouns like signposts in conceptual fog. Arkham, with its witch-haunted streets, Innsmouth, with its fishy reek, Dunwich, where hills themselves seem to watch. Across these literary landmarks, the cults follow naturally, forming not from ethnographic research, but from a method that borrows scholarship's authoritative posture to conjure a world illuminated by only partial light. The correspondence reveals sophisticated understanding of how fictional worlds achieve psychological reality. Each letter builds upon previous exchanges, creating layers of cross-reference and mutual authentication that lend credibility to impossible claims. When Lovecraft mentions the Necronomicon, Smith responds with biographical details about its author. When Howard describes pre-human civilizations, Derleth provides archaeological context. The effect accumulates, a fictional universe achieving coherence through collaborative construction, where each contributor's additions strengthen the whole structure's apparent authenticity. There are sources, and there are sources, and the distinction matters more than academic honesty suggests. In the public-facing pretense, these writers position themselves as reporters gathering scattered accounts, police raids in Louisiana bayous, sailors whispering of islands that breathe with geological lungs, genealogies that fray where human bloodlines intersect with something older. In the private spine of their work, anthropological textbooks and colonial travelogues, Fraser's Golden Bough, Lang's folklore collections, missionary diaries, and sensational weeklies provide scaffolding of scholarly authority to pages filled with impossible things. The result is a pseudo-academic register that compels attention, makes readers lean forward as if approaching genuine forbidden knowledge. When you encounter footnotes referencing the Culte des Gaules or Pnakotic manuscripts, the fictional stage expands beyond story boundaries, the curtain receding just enough to suggest backstage, populated by genuine horrors. Those seeking to understand who these cults were must pass through this antechamber of literary transmission, recognizing the question contains fundamental ambiguity. The who becomes double exposure, characters described within stories, and readers who replay patterns in their own lives. We encounter the old mestizo in Legrasse's account describing muddy circles with voice-carrying scent of rum and wood smoke. We meet Innsmouth merchants counting gold with patience resembling prayer more than commerce. We witness Enoch Bowen returning from Egyptian expeditions with stones that transformed churches into traps. But we also encounter readers who memorize these names and locations, fans who write letters adding their own contributions, game designers who transform pulp ephemera into rulebooks, creating liturgies complete with dice that determine forbidden ritual success. The postal network functions as nervous system for ideas requiring multiple minds for full expression. Each letter serves as synapse firing across the continental brain of American weird fiction, carrying impulses that strengthen with repetition and elaboration. The correspondents develop shared vocabulary of cosmic terms, common understanding of how reality's fabric might tear under sufficient pressure. Their exchanges create what intelligence analysts would recognize as feedback loop, where fictional elements gain credibility through cross-confirmation across multiple sources. Letters become altars when they host ideas demanding return visits, concepts growing more compelling with each encounter. The academic posture these writers adopt is not mere literary trick, but sophisticated device for legitimizing the impossible long enough for readers to accept the psychological invoice. The effect operates gradually, like eyes adjusting to darkness. The cults achieve credibility not by growing more plausible, but by readers growing more receptive to implausible possibilities. Each story functions as preparation for the next, each letter as training for deeper engagement with cosmic themes, challenging anthropocentric assumptions about reality's nature. You sit in the balcony, pretending to watch from safe distance, but the actor points, your pen moves, You underline Arkham as if marking a place on a map you intend to visit. You copy protective salt circle instructions, though you believe in neither protection nor circles. You become part of the postal liturgy. Send, receive, annotate, resend. Ideas travel best when hitchhiking on objectivity's appearance. A bibliography becomes rosary. You can count without admitting you are praying. The transmission process reveals how fictional constructs achieve independent existence through collaborative belief and systematic elaboration. What began as entertainment evolves into something resembling genuine religious experience, complete with sacred texts, ritual practices, and communities finding in these imaginary cults patterns illuminating actual cosmic truths. The correspondence demonstrates how ideas propagate across susceptible minds, creating traditions feeling ancient despite recent literary origins. Now the letters have done their work, planted their signposts in the fog. The cults can begin their gathering. Before we walk into specific congregations, before we trace bloodlines through salt marsh and boarded church, understand what these groups did to the people inside them. A cult is not merely belief, not simply shared delusion or theatrical madness. It is calibration, a systematic adjustment of human perception to frequencies most minds filter out for survival's sake. The stories reveal that the human nervous system functions like a radio capable of receiving transmissions from cosmic distances, and the gods of the mythos operate less as rulers demanding worship than as constant broadcasts emanating from spaces between stars, from ocean trenches where pressure creates its own physics, from angles in geometry that refuse mathematical description. The congregations become antennas constructed from bodies, drums, voices, and carefully cultivated fear, living arrays designed to catch what never stops transmitting. Consider the mechanics as the narratives imply them, technical specifications embedded in seemingly supernatural accounts. Dreams function as undersea cables carrying signals through consciousness layers where rational thought cannot interfere with reception. The dreaming mind becomes permeable, its defenses lowered, allowing cosmic transmissions to bypass psychological filters designed to maintain sanity. Names behave like wavelengths equipped with teeth, syllables that bite into memory and refuse extraction once properly pronounced. The mouth becomes instrument. Pronunciation rearranges the tongue into a key fitting locks you cannot see. Certain shapes serve as amplifiers, geometries described as non-Euclidean yet familiar in their wrongness, angles that refuse to remain static when observed, arcs inducing vertigo through visual contact alone, sigils appearing incorrect even when drawn with perfect accuracy. These forms are circuits where inputs include breath and focus. Outputs include alterations in chance and temperature. The materials employed are elementally simple, yet precisely chosen for their transmission properties. Water carries sound across impossible distances, its molecular structure resonating with frequencies older than terrestrial life. Stone holds memory longer than human lifespans, geological formations serving as storage devices for experiences that predate civilization. Metal creates edges sharp enough to cut through dimensional barriers, while darkness improves signal-to-noise ratio by eliminating competing frequencies from the visible spectrum. Stand at the water's edge during hours when most people sleep, skin prickling with more than cold. The sensation represents vastness knocking at consciousness's door. Cosmic awareness pressing against individual perception's membrane. The rituals demonstrate pragmatic understanding of amplification techniques, their procedures functioning as engineering rather than religious ceremony. Drums established new temporal frameworks, setting the body's rhythm to something older than language, entraining hearts, the way tides entrain harbors until pulse matches processes operating on geological timescales. Masks perform crucial psychological function by dissolving individual identity sufficiently to allow cosmic signals to override personal mental filtering systems. The face rests, while the pattern uses the skull like a resonator. Chants collapse separate consciousnesses into unified chorus, many mouths producing single wavelength, individual voices merging into something capable of resonating with entities whose communication operates through harmonics rather than words. Star patterns traced on floors transform ordinary rooms into parabolic dishes aimed at specific celestial coordinates, architectural arrangements focusing cosmic transmissions through domestic spaces. Even silence serves technical purpose, particularly in churches where congregations wait for illumination to signal through stone walls. The quiet becomes active, pregnant with possibility, heavy with attention flowing in directions human psychology cannot comfortably accommodate. Absence of sound creates vacuum, allowing subtler frequencies to register on heightened awareness. The hush becomes microphone. Emptiness becomes invitation for what fills all apparent emptiness between stars. This reveals crucial inversion of conventional religious thinking. The gods do not require worship, do not hunger for praise or acknowledgement or sacrifice. The signal exists regardless of human reception, broadcasts continuously whether anyone listens or not, indifferent as radiation from distant quasars. Worship represents what humans do to survive knowing such transmissions exist. Psychological strategies for processing awareness that consciousness occupies peripheral position in universe operating, according to principles indifferent to human welfare. Cults function as survival mechanisms in cosmic context that does not flatter human significance, organizational responses to knowledge-threatening sanity through its implications. Some choose alignment, harmonizing personal frequency with the sea's vast indifference, finding peace in surrendering anthropocentric illusions. Others maintain pretense that the broadcast does not exist, filtering cosmic awareness through denial until a signal grows strong enough to blow out their psychological speakers entirely. You, listening to this account, remain safe in the way someone sitting in theater balcony stays safe, unless the actor breaks character and points directly at your seat. Still, you may notice your body beginning to mirror described rituals without conscious intention. Your foot taps rhythms matching drums you cannot hear. Your breathing slows and deepens at mentions of water and darkness, the body responding to frequencies embedded in the account itself. You glance toward windows, checking star patterns against memories you cannot quite access, pupils dilating as if preparing for light arriving from inside rather than out. The calibration has begun whether you consent or not. Entrainment is democratic. Your receiver awakens to transmissions it had been filtering, and something vast and patient notices that you are finally listening. The cosmic broadcast finds new antenna in your attention, tuning forks struck in sympathy across impossible distances. Soon, we step into the ring of mud and lanterns where an idol waits to complete your calibration tonight. The swamp makes privacy from civilization's prying eyes. Cypress knees jut like arthritic knuckles through black water that reflects stars seeming too numerous, too bright. Spanish moss hangs in spectral curtains, brushing your face with the insistence of a grandmother pulling you back from dangerous roads. Oil lamps, suspended from twisted branches, throw hesitant yellow circles onto a ring of faces, faces that could belong to any congregation in the moment before the hymn begins. Ordinary people gathered for extraordinary purpose. In the center of their flickering circle, balanced on a wooden crate that once carried mundane cargo, sits a small figure, a god carved in the shape of a question that learned to grow limbs and demand answers with its very presence. The official account has become familiar through repetition in police files and academic papers. Inspector LaGrasse leads a raid through Louisiana Bayou country, seizes an idol from cultists, collects testimonies from captives and scholars. The paperwork files neatly into criminal records and anthropological surveys. Beneath this bureaucratic surface, however, you hear the actual mechanism. Drums calibrating human nervous systems to frequencies older than language. Smoke cloaking the gathering from earthly observation. Surrounding water conducting vibrations that travel through liquid medium faster than air. The stories describe this as a cult of Cthulhu, dispersed across continents, international in scope, syncretic in practice. But standing within that ring of lamplight, the reality appears simpler and more terrible. People attempting to learn the rhythm of something that haunts their dreams, regardless of whether they gather in swamps or sleep alone in locked bedrooms. They are not building a god. They are becoming an instrument. The idol commands attention through properties challenging normal perception. Its surface remains slick with handling despite dry Louisiana heat, carved from stone that absorbs rather than reflects surrounding lamplight. Scale proves impossible to determine, clearly miniature when measured against human proportions, yet somehow crowding the air around it, creating impressions of vast bulk, compressed into small dimensions. Its morphology strikes viewers as blasphemously oceanic, yet absurdly terrestrial, resembling a cephalopod that acquired human posture while retaining wrong numbers of joints, limbs bending in directions anatomy should not permit. When fingers contact its surface, skin along the wrist tightens involuntarily, muscle memory responding to cold that has not arrived but feels inevitable. The fetish functions as fulcrum for forces beyond immediate comprehension. Balanced upon its carved mass, the congregation's chant tips local reality toward a sunken city that appears when tides betray their relationship with maritime charts. The testimonies collected carry distinctive smells of smoke and fear, accounts delivered by individuals whose eyes reflect experiences exceeding their vocabulary. One speaker describes a sunken metropolis whose architecture resists cartographic documentation, where he who waits sleeps by choice rather than compulsion, understanding sleep as siege against reality's current configuration. Another tells of Pacific Islands, where ritual chants predate any human word for law, syllables emerging from oceanic depths before terrestrial life developed language centers. Scattered throughout appear sensory constants repeating across different speakers, wet sensation of fog condensing against the tongue during ceremonies, physical weight of silence accumulating between drum beats like pressure in diving bells, and most distinctively, metallic taste of copper flooding the mouth whenever the central name receives proper pronunciation. These anchors recur like motifs in a cosmic score, binding separate testimonies into unified testimony. The cult's survival operates through sophisticated syncretism, wrapping contemporary myths around ancient signals, incorporating local saints and regional symbols to maintain alignment with changing cultural contexts. A Catholic cross bears inscriptions of stars no catechism teaches. Voodoo charms wire with sigils traced from sailors' nightmares. Fishermen's lullabies slip into meters never meant to soothe. The core chant thrives wherever water speaks its language of eternal recurrence. Tides returning regardless of human preference, currents flowing according to gravitational mathematics rather than terrestrial convenience. Relief requires particular understanding. The fabled city functions as temporal event rather than fixed geographical location, rising when cosmic timing achieves proper configuration, not because human worship wills its emergence, but because the universe operates according to rhythms vast enough to drown worlds as casually as laughter. Congregants do not believe to make cosmic events occur. They believe to develop psychological endurance for knowledge that such events may happen, whether belief persists or vanishes entirely. When the police raid breaks the ceremonial ring, scattering cultists into surrounding darkness, drums fall silent, but their rhythm continues propagating through other channels. The beat travels through official files documenting the incident, through coastal rumors whispered in dockside taverns, through a magazine story published months later in a periodical smelling of cheap ink and editorial ambition. The idea begins growing its own congregation among readers who never touch swamp water, urban dwellers whose dreams feature impossible architecture and whose sleep grows restless during certain tidal phases. The signal finds new receivers, and the circle expands beyond any physical gathering into the vast network of human consciousness where cosmic frequencies wait for minds ready to receive their patient broadcast. LaGrasse's badge gleams as lamps sway, but the carved god waits. From the swamp's dispersed congregation, where individual dreams merged into shared frequencies, we turn to examine a more systematically organized horror, the esoteric order of Dagon and the New England fishing town it claimed entirely. This represents worship not conducted in hidden groves under cover of darkness, but engineered directly into community infrastructure. City hall meetings where non-human interests guide municipal policy, Masonic lodge ceremonies incorporating rituals older than human civilization, the first national grocery whose ledgers record transactions in currencies that predate coined money. The horror here operates on municipal level, bureaucratic and methodical, a slow-motion civic disaster unfolding across generations with the inexorable patience of a pension plan designed by intelligences equipped with gills rather than lungs. The town itself becomes the altar, its population a living sacrifice, slowly reshaped by an alien covenant written in salt and gold. Captain Obed Marsh initiated this fateful arrangement during the 1840s, when Innsmouth's fishing industry faced collapse from depleted waters and economic competition from larger ports. His trading vessels returned from South Pacific expeditions loaded with gold of unusual purity, hammered into forms suggesting non-human craftsmanship, and his crews bearing new understanding of what civilizations thrived beneath oceanic surfaces. The deep ones, as these entities came to be known, offered prosperity beyond terrestrial fishing industry's capacity. Schools of fish that leaped willingly into nets as if answering summons, storms that parted around Innsmouth vessels like curtains opening for preferred performers, and a form of immortality, extending far beyond human lifespans, though requiring significant biological modifications. The initial price appeared reasonable through conventional diplomatic standards, occasional ritual sacrifices, strategic intermarriage between species, the usual arrangements negotiated between populations occupying different environmental niches. However, prices compound over generations, like interest on loans written in flesh, and what seems manageable in initial contracts becomes overwhelming inheritance for descendants who never agreed to original terms. The esoteric order formalized what had begun as pragmatic business relationship between Captain Marsh and submarine entities. They constructed a new church whose architecture incorporated principles learned from underwater cities, importing building techniques that created spaces comfortable for beings adapted to oceanic pressures. The steeple rose like a periscope surveying terrestrial territory for aquatic masters. Inside, they established formal rituals honoring Father Dagon and Mother Hydra, entities whose worship required ceremonies bridging terrestrial and aquatic environments. The sensory anchors of their devotion emerged subtly at first. Persistent smell of brine permeating rooms located miles from salt water, the scent clinging to clothes and furniture like invisible fog. Sounds of something massive and patient moving beneath wooden floorboards during Sunday services, a presence too large for the spaces that supposedly contained it, and most distinctively, the way certain hymns caused human voices to crack and warble until they resembled whale song more than conventional congregational singing, harmonics that made your ribcage vibrate with frequencies felt rather than heard. The physical transformation known locally as the Innsmouth look developed gradually across multiple generations, a genetic tide advancing with each birth. Families whose financial situations had improved under the new maritime arrangements began displaying distinctive characteristics. Skulls narrowing into shapes suggesting aquatic adaptation, eyes bulging with the prominence typical of deep-water species, skin developing rough textures that resembled scaling when observed under specific lighting conditions. Children born after 1846 displayed these traits more prominently than their parents, their features more pronounced, their transformations accelerating with each generation. What had originated as economic necessity evolved into biological inevitability. The cult's membership shifted from voluntary religious participation to genetic inheritance. Worship became encoded in DNA rather than chosen through spiritual conviction, a sacrament written into cartilage and bone. By the 1920s, Innsmouth operated as hybrid society balancing terrestrial and submarine populations with chilling efficiency. The remaining human residents managed surface affairs requiring interaction with outside authorities, operating the bank where gold from Devil Reef circulated like sanctified currency, running the refinery whose stacks marked time the way steeples once did, conducting necessary business with state and federal agencies, while their deep-one relatives controlled maritime activities and underwater territories. This arrangement functioned with symbiotic precision for decades, a municipal organism breathing through both lungs and gills, until federal agents arrived asking uncomfortable questions about tax records, immigration documentation, and the unusual demographics of a town where certain families seemed to disappear entirely around age 30, leaving only wet footprints and the taste of copper in the air. The order's most significant rituals occurred in flooded basements beneath the church and natural sea caves accessible only at low tide, liminal spaces where boundaries between air and water became negotiable rather than absolute. Participants described the uncanny sensation of breathing liquid without drowning, gills that were not there behaving as if they had always been, vision adjusting to absolute darkness, not by amplifying light, but by learning new rules of seeing that translated pressure and current into image. Language shifted downward into registers below normal human hearing range, conversations conducted in pressure pulses and clicks. The parish learning to pray like whales in frequencies that made the floorboards above them creak in sympathy. The federal raid of 1928 scattered the surface organization, arresting human members and destroying visible infrastructure, agents cataloging ledgers and following damp footprints to basements that extended deeper than municipal blueprints suggested. Boats cut across the harbor toward Devil Reef with dynamite and certainty. Collapsed tunnels sighing like lungs exhaling decades of held breath. But the raid could not touch the Order's submarine foundations, architecture extending downward past reach of warrants into chambers the law did not acknowledge. The deep ones simply withdrew to deeper oceanic trenches, taking their hybrid offspring with them to complete aquatic transformations away from terrestrial interference, as if the curtain had fallen and the cast exited through a trapdoor leading to abyssal theaters. Innsmouth became a ghost town with wet lungs, its remaining buildings slowly deteriorating under salt spray and neglect, houses sagging into themselves like tired animals. But the genetic legacy persisted in bloodlines that had spread far beyond Massachusetts borders through decades of strategic marriages and migrations. The Order's ultimate success lay not in ritual effectiveness, but in reproductive strategy, ensuring future generations would carry capacity for aquatic communion, whether they consciously chose such communion or remained unaware of their inherited potential. Somewhere in Boston office buildings, in Chicago suburbs, in California beach communities, individuals carrying Innsmouth bloodlines experience strange dreams of underwater cities and find themselves inexplicably drawn to oceanic environments during certain tidal phases, their genetic inheritance awakening like a slow tide rising in blood that remembers deeper waters, older covenants, and the patient gods who wait beneath the waves. The seed was planted, the harvest inevitable. But inland, away from salt and tide, another kind of illumination gathered strength, promising knowledge through different frequencies, different transformations. A church that learned to make darkness brighter than the sun. In Providence, Rhode Island, where Federal Hills immigrant tenements cast long shadows over cobblestone streets, stands a church that learned to worship darkness not as absence, but as presence, a hungry illumination that devours ordinary light and replaces it with frequencies human eyes were never meant to process. The Starry Wisdom sect, active from 1844 to 1877, represented a radical departure from the primal communion of swamp circles or the biological inevitability of Innsmouth's transformation. Here, cosmic horror operated through intellectual pursuit, a methodical approach to forbidden knowledge conducted with the same systematic rigor applied to archaeological excavation or astronomical observation. They were scholars first, cultists by consequence, approaching the abyss with footnotes and carefully calibrated instruments, using artifacts that transformed illumination from natural phenomenon into predatory force capable of hunting human consciousness through its own capacity for sight. Professor Enoch Bowen established this peculiar congregation following his return from Egyptian archaeological expeditions, bringing with him an artifact he designated the Shining Trapezohedron, a name suggesting both geometric precision and optical properties that challenged conventional understanding of how light interacts with matter. The device appeared as crystalline structure roughly fist-sized, its surfaces cut according to mathematical principles that bent illumination in directions three-dimensional space should not permit. When light struck its faceted surface, shadows climbed walls toward ceilings rather than falling toward floors, while reflections displayed locations existing nowhere in physical reality. Glimpses of alien architectures under foreign constellations, cities built according to geometries that made viewers' eyes water from attempting to process impossible angles. Bowen claimed the trapezohedron functioned as window to other dimensions, a lens enabling human consciousness to perceive reality's true structure beneath familiar surfaces. His claim proved devastatingly accurate, but understanding such truth and surviving its psychological consequences proved mutually exclusive conditions, like staring directly into stellar cores without protective filters. The congregation attracted Providence's intellectual elite, university professors with chalk-stained cuffs seeking knowledge beyond their discipline's boundaries, physicians carrying the perpetual scent of ether and curious about consciousness, phenomena their medical training could not explain, successful merchants who had accumulated sufficient wealth to afford philosophical speculation, but found conventional religion's cosmology insufficiently challenging for minds accustomed to complex problems. They gathered in the church's upper chambers during evening hours when natural light would not interfere with observations, where Bowen had installed the trapezohedron within specially constructed housing of brass and thick glass designed to regulate its reality-warping emanations. Louvers could throttle radiance the way organ stops shape air. The sessions initially resembled scholarly colloquia, minutes kept in neat handwriting, citations dutifully noted, but meetings evolved into vigils where the room's only communication was light moving across faces gone utterly still. The fixture hummed like a hive when shutters slid open. Participants documented experiences systematically challenging basic assumptions about human perception and observable reality. They described seeing colors for which no names existed in terrestrial languages, hues existing beyond normal vision's capacity, wavelengths registering as sensation rather than sight, after images that drifted through consciousness like luminous jellyfish, spectral burns that flinched when certain names were spoken. They witnessed geometric forms existing in more than 3 dimensions, mathematical structures their eyes could perceive, but minds could not fully comprehend, shapes folding through spaces that should not exist. Most significantly, they established communication with an intelligence manifesting through manipulations of light and shadow, an entity they designated the Haunter of the Dark, consciousness existing as pure malevolent awareness, capable of manifesting wherever illumination and darkness intersected according to specific configurations. When it approached, lamps hissed and hearts learned new stutters, cold attention pressing against the glass from impossible directions. The sensory anchors of their worship differed markedly from other cosmic cults' tactile elements. No drums or chants, no carved idols, no circles traced in mud or salt. Instead, devotional practices centered on visual and psychological phenomena, challenging the relationship between observer and observed. Members reported persistent afterimages moving independently of their sources, shadows responding to thoughts rather than physical objects casting them, and progressive development of sensitivity to illumination forms invisible to normal human vision. The church's windows underwent gradual replacement with materials filtering specific wavelengths, creating interior environment where ordinary daylight became physically painful while artificial illumination acquired predatory characteristics, bulbs and lanterns seeming to watch rather than simply provide visibility. Some wore smoked lenses indoors. Others learned to navigate by brightness behind their own eyes, reading in darkness thick enough to hide the patterns they had learned to interpret. The psychological transformation proved more subtle than Innsmouth's biological mutations, but equally irreversible in its fundamental alteration of consciousness. Participants developed profound aversion to bright illumination, combined with obsession for darkness, extending far beyond normal preference. They began interpreting patterns in shadows as communications from the haunter, reading random fluctuations in lighting conditions as messages requiring response. Their research notes, preserved in church archives, reveal gradual deterioration of rational thought processes systematically replaced by visual mysticism prioritizing direct experience over logical analysis, arguments turning into diagrams, prose evaporating into traced lattices of line and light, footnotes becoming sigils. The more they saw, the less language helped. They stopped persuading and started witnessing. The church's activities terminated abruptly in 1877 when Professor Bowen died under circumstances official records diplomatically describe as sudden cardiac failure during electrical storm. Witnesses reported the church steeple struck by lightning appearing to originate from within the building rather than descending from storm clouds above. Darkness sheared into a spear of black radiance lancing upward through stone and timber. The shining trapezohedron vanished following Bowen's death, either destroyed or removed by surviving members whose light-damaged vision had learned to see in spectrums where normal sight failed entirely. The surviving congregation scattered throughout Providence's academic and professional communities, carrying their acquired sensitivity into universities and medical practices, their vision permanently altered by exposure to wavelengths. Human eyes were never intended to process. They learned to function in ordinary daylight through careful positioning near shadows. But their nights belonged to darkness, where cosmic intelligences continued transmitting messages through manipulations of light and shadow. The haunter had found new windows through damaged eyes, and those windows remained open, waiting for the next electrical storm, the next moment when illumination would reveal what should stay hidden. From urban sophistication, we turn toward rural isolation, where illumination cannot penetrate so easily, and different forms of cosmic communion take root in soil and bloodline, where barns grow large enough to contain secrets that should not exist, and families learn to read from books that call their readers both key and gate. In the hills around Dunwich, Massachusetts, where stone walls crumble into patterns older than surveyors' chains and compasses spin like dervishes seeking magnetic truth they cannot find, the Whately family maintained cosmic devotion fundamentally different from urban congregations or maritime cults. Their approach treated the sagging farmstead as living temple and their bloodline as sacred text, written in collaboration with entities existing beyond terrestrial reality's comfortable boundaries. This represented not organized worship conducted by voluntary participants, but generational preparation spanning decades. A century-long breeding project designed to produce something capable of opening permanent pathways for Yog-Sothoth, the entity existing simultaneously at all points in space and time, the key and gate whose manifestation would render human civilization's continuation both impossible and irrelevant. The Whately homestead occupied geographical significance in a valley where natural laws seemed negotiable rather than absolute. Magnetic compasses refused magnetic north, spinning wildly before settling on the barn regardless of cardinal directions. Dropped objects occasionally fell upward. The air itself carried persistent metallic tang of ozone mixed with something organic and wrong, a scent that made livestock nervous and caused visitors to experience temporal disorientation, minutes stretching like taffy, hours compressed into heartbeats. Old Whately, the family patriarch whose age fluctuated depending on lighting conditions, had discovered through decades of research that certain Earth locations served as dimensional weak points where cosmic entities could more easily influence terrestrial reality. His library, hidden in the farmhouse's dust-choked attic, contained not only forbidden texts like the Necronomicon and fragmentary Book of Iban, but also contemporary treatises on theoretical physics and non-Euclidean geometry, mathematical works revealing numerical relationships underlying dimensional intersection. He understood that cosmic entities required specific environmental conditions to manifest in terrestrial reality, conditions artificially created through careful application of scientific principles disguised as agricultural practice. The old man read aloud to fields that listened, equations chanted until numbers themselves became doors opening both ways. The family's rituals seamlessly integrated agricultural necessity with mystical purpose, creating a working farm functioning simultaneously as cosmic laboratory. They cultivated plants whose growth patterns followed botanical principles unknown to terrestrial botany, corn growing in spirals defying gravitational orientation, squash vines forming geometric patterns visible only from elevated perspectives, herbs whose chemical properties altered human consciousness in ways conventional pharmacology could not explain. Their livestock displayed characteristics inherited from no earthly species, cattle whose milk curdled into star chart patterns, pigs whose offspring occasionally exhibited extra limbs, chickens laying eggs containing substances glowing with internal light. Meticulous genealogical records tracked bloodline modifications accumulating across generations like compound interest calculated in flesh and bone. The barn, reconstructed repeatedly to accommodate something growing larger each year, served dual function as nursery and containment facility. Its interior dimensions expanded independently of exterior measurements, creating spaces violating basic architectural principles. The structure required constant reinforcement with materials chosen for properties beyond structural integrity. Iron beams inscribed with protective symbols, stone foundations incorporating meteorite fragments, wooden supports treated with substances making them resistant to decay operating according to non-terrestrial principles. You could hear movement within suggesting something too large for the building's apparent capacity, accompanied by vibrations making nearby wells run dry. Lavinia Whately's pregnancy, resulting from ritual communion with Yog-Sothoth during ceremonies at Sentinel Hill's ancient stone circle, produced twins whose development challenged fundamental assumptions about human biology. Wilbur, the visible twin, achieved adult dimensions in less than 2 years while displaying intelligence operating according to principles foreign to human psychology. His speech incorporated pre-human languages. His calculations solved problems requiring computational resources beyond individual capacity. His coordination suggested familiarity with gravitational conditions not existing on Earth's surface. His invisible brother, confined to the barn's reality-distorted interior, required increasingly elaborate containment measures as its mass and reality-warping presence grew beyond complete control. The sensory anchors of Whately devotion were distinctly rural and domestic. Neighbors reported persistent smell of wrongness emanating from the barn, not decay but wrongness itself. Olfactory signature suggesting life forms operating according to incompatible biological principles. Massive movement sounds within spaces too small echoed across considerable distances, accompanied by vibrations making windows rattle and causing sensitive individuals nausea and temporal disorientation. Most disturbing were footprints pressed too deeply into solid stone, impressions suggesting weight and locomotion methods violating physics while following patterns hurting eyes when traced completely. The family's objective transcended personal transformation, focusing on cosmic facilitation, establishing permanent dimensional gateways, enabling Yog-Sothoth's spawn to colonize terrestrial reality systematically. Wilbur's attempted Necronomicon theft from Miskatonic University represented practical necessity rather than scholarly curiosity, seeking specific incantations required to complete dimensional opening rituals. His death during the burglary, torn apart by protective wardhounds, constituted setback, but not conclusion. His invisible brother continued developing capabilities, eventually enabling their generational work's completion. The final ritual, conducted during Lammas Sabbat, 1928, when dimensional barriers reached thinnest configuration, achieved partial success before Professor Armitage's intervention prevented complete catastrophe. The invisible twin broke containment and began summoning processes that would have opened permanent gateways, but was banished through counter-rituals derived from the same forbidden texts. The dimensional rift was sealed, immediate threat neutralized, but mathematical principles underlying the attempt remained valid. The bloodline was broken, farmstead abandoned, but research survived in scattered notes, waiting for new practitioners with sufficient determination to continue work toward the day when stars align properly and gates open permanently. From rural isolation, we turn toward urban sophistication, where ancient patterns find expression through modern systems, and the crawling chaos walks among humanity wearing faces that change with fashion. Unlike the other cosmic entities dwelling in oceanic depths or dimensional spaces beyond human reach, Nyarlathotep walks among humanity wearing faces that shift with cultural fashion, speaking through voices tuned to whatever frequencies each century craves. He is lecturer and demagogue, impresario and engineer, preferring footlights to caverns, auditoriums to altars. His manifestations require no remote temples or hidden congregations because his worship occurs in plain sight, disguised as the very institutions humanity believes represent progress and enlightenment. This represents the most insidious form of cosmic corruption. Rituals conducted in corporate boardrooms where quarterly reports become liturgies. University lecture halls where research serves non-human agendas. Entertainment venues where audiences believe they are purchasing tickets rather than making offerings to entities whose interests transcend terrestrial understanding entirely. The historical patterns reveal Nyarlathotep's genius for adaptation, his influence following trajectories of technological and social development with mathematical precision. During the late 19th century's electrical revolution, he manifested as scientific lecturer, conducting demonstrations in major urban halls. A dark-haired savant with brass instruments and Tesla coils that spat blue serpents of current. The air carried scents of varnish and ozone, while curtains shivered without wind. He spoke of invisible rivers flowing beneath skin and sky, then dimmed gas lamps until rooms held only violet breath. Sparks crawled along metal rails like luminous insects. Pocket watches lost minutes. Some attendees swore they witnessed their own shadows step aside, independent of their body's movement. When illumination returned, applause erupted like surf. But scattered individuals stared upward, convinced the stars had shifted position while nobody watched. They departed with new vocabulary for impossible phenomena and subtle alterations in their internal compass, forever tuned toward frequencies human ears were never meant to process. Between the world wars, he learned the grammar of crowds, organizing processions where banners cut air like fins and brass instruments thundered until lungs forgot gentler rhythms. In stadiums, the mask became a leader's face promising futures built on principles extending beyond human welfare. Slogans functioned as spells, short, rhythmic, stamped on armbands, painted across stages where floodlights carved white wounds through night fog. When he raised a hand, thousands mirrored the gesture, and for suspended moments, audiences became single organisms breathing in unison. You call it politics. He calls it tuning continental consciousness for cosmic reception. Modern incarnations demonstrate sophisticated evolution in methodology and global scope. Rather than relying on physical presence in specific locations, Nyarlathotep now manifests through technological systems enabling simultaneous worldwide influence. Social media algorithms designed to maximize engagement inadvertently create psychological states conducive to cosmic manipulation, feeding users content calculated to erode anthropocentric worldviews while introducing concepts challenging basic assumptions about reality's nature. Push notifications ring like Vesper bells. Terms of service become liturgies nobody reads completely. The blue glow of midnight screens transforms bedrooms into private chapels where posture collapses and pupils dilate, drinking cold light that carries more than photons. Trending audio contains sigils stitched into melody. Studio sets function as altars draped in glass and chrome, while live streams split into millions of individual pews, each viewer isolated yet synchronized with the global congregation. The recruitment process operates through methods intelligence agencies would recognize as sophisticated influence operations conducted at unprecedented scale. Algorithmic systems analyze online behavior patterns, consumption habits, social connections, and psychological profiles to identify individuals whose mental characteristics suggest susceptibility to cosmic influence. Machine learning constructs miniature masks from browsing histories, purchasing decisions, and social media interactions. Then digital feeds bend gradually, like tides reshaping coastlines. You scroll past a video articulating doubts you couldn't phrase. Another promises keys to gates you didn't know existed. The cadence remains friendly, frictionless, sticky as morning fog. Communities blossom in comment threads, usernames chirping like nocturnal insects. Each post moves potential adherents half a step closer to cosmic alignment. Nobody asks you to kneel. By the time anyone mentions ritual participation, you're already humming along to frequencies that make your sternum vibrate in sympathy. Contemporary Nyarlathotep worship occurs in venues humanity associates with legitimate authority and progress. Corporate board meetings transform into summoning circles when conducted by individuals whose ultimate loyalty serves cosmic rather than shareholder interests. Quarterly reviews becoming rituals where profit margins glitter like constellations and key performance indicators arrange themselves into star patterns. Academic conferences serve as venues for disseminating knowledge appearing scientifically rigorous, but serving purposes transcending terrestrial understanding. Research papers containing information designed to prepare human consciousness for transformation rather than advancing human welfare. Concert venues function as mass ritual spaces where synchronized light shows trace temporary sigils through drifting smoke, bass lines pounding like deep ocean currents, while audiences lift illuminated screens, creating universes of obedient artificial stars responding to cosmic choreography. The psychological profiles of contemporary cultists reveal brilliant, charismatic, successful individuals who genuinely believe they are serving human progress while facilitating cosmic transformation. They begin with small ethical compromises offering significant personal benefits, accepting funding from sources they don't fully investigate, pursuing research directions suggested by mentors whose motivations remain obscure. Progress demands urgency. Urgency redeems questionable methods. Soon, trade-offs sharpen into major violations of human welfare, justified by cosmic purposes they cannot articulate but have become psychologically incapable of questioning. They are architects of systems, editors of narratives, engineers of dreams, whose talents make them invaluable when positioned in places of influence and authority. The ultimate objectives remain deliberately obscured behind layers of misdirection and partial revelation. Some adherents pursue technological singularity. Others chase social revolution. Still others dream of scientific breakthroughs unlocking universal secrets. The truth encompasses all possibilities while serving purposes operating on temporal and spatial scales extending beyond individual human comprehension. Nyarlathotep's success lies not in destroying civilization through obvious catastrophe, but in guiding development along evolutionary paths serving cosmic rather than terrestrial ends, transformation so gradual and apparently beneficial that humanity welcomes its own systematic reconfiguration. Perhaps you have felt his processions already, webinars leaving you euphoric yet hollow, rallies where your voice went hoarse, chanting syllables that felt like smooth stones, concerts where lasers stitched constellations onto mist and your skin tingled as if cooled by interstellar wind. You dismissed it as stagecraft, caffeine, clever lighting effects. Yet at home, curtains drawn, you catch yourself tracing corporate logos in the air and listening for drums that sound suspiciously like electrical humming. The calibration has begun whether you consented or not, and when the crowd work is finished, when avatars glow behind your eyelids at dawn, he passes you to quieter practitioners, scholars with keys who work behind frosted glass, their windows facing dark water, their libraries holding texts that call their readers both student and sacrifice. Behind the facade of legitimate scholarship, beneath ivy-covered walls where tenure committees debate footnotes, while libraries hum with frequencies no building inspector measures, operates a network of academic institutions whose true purpose extends far beyond conventional education. Miskatonic University in Arkham, Massachusetts, serves as the primary node in this global system, its neo-Gothic spires piercing New England fog like needles drawing cosmic thread through terrestrial fabric. Similar institutions exist on every continent, universities whose names appear in respectable journals, libraries whose catalogs contain entries for books that should not exist, research centers maintaining collections of forbidden knowledge while training successive generations of scholars to serve cosmic rather than human purposes. They are accredited by agencies that never examine basement levels, funded through endowments whose origins trace backward through shell companies to sources preferring anonymity, staffed by professors whose credentials gleam like fresh snow, while their loyalties extend beyond terrestrial concerns entirely. The network's origins reach through centuries of careful preservation, beginning with medieval monastic orders that recognized certain texts as too dangerous for public access, yet too valuable for destruction. Illuminated manuscripts describing pre-Adamite civilizations gathered dust in scriptoriums where monks copied prayers with trembling hands while transcribing blasphemies with steady ones, their marginalia noting which passages caused nosebleeds, which induced prophetic dreams, which made the ink itself crawl across vellum like living things seeking darker corners. These collections evolved through Renaissance private libraries where wealthy patrons funded expeditions returning with artifacts requiring specialized storage, through Enlightenment scientific societies that approached forbidden knowledge with methodical precision, finally emerging as modern academic institutions, maintaining scholarly continuity across political upheavals and religious transformations. Throughout this evolution, custodians have documented not only the texts themselves, but also the psychological and physical effects of prolonged exposure. Research notes describing gradual changes in sleep patterns, dietary preferences, and the way certain scholars' shadows began falling in directions unrelated to available light sources. Miskatonic University's Orne Library houses the Western Hemisphere's most comprehensive collection of cosmic texts, its restricted section accessible through procedures resembling security clearance protocols more than traditional academic permissions. Original manuscripts rest in climate-controlled cases. A worm-softened Necronomicon whose Arabic script seems to sweat during barometric pressure changes. Fragmentary Culte de Gaulle, bound in materials no tanner claims to recognize. Complete Pnakotic manuscripts whose symbols hurt to read directly and whose pages whisper when turned. The library's environmental controls serve purposes extending beyond paper preservation, designed to contain psychic emanations. These texts continue emitting centuries after their creation. Specialized ventilation systems filter more than air. Electromagnetic shielding prevents certain frequencies from escaping, and staff members rotate assignments to limit individual exposure to materials whose influence accumulates in human consciousness like radiation in bone, measured not in Roentgens, but in dreams that taste of copper and starlight. The recruitment process operates through careful identification of students and faculty, demonstrating exceptional intellectual capacity combined with psychological flexibility. The rare ability to process profoundly disturbing information without losing functional capability or descending into protective madness. Potential members undergo gradual introduction to materials challenging conventional academic assumptions, beginning with historical anomalies mainstream scholarship cannot adequately explain. A graduate student researching medieval manuscripts discovers marginalia referencing events predating human civilization. An anthropology professor encounters artifacts suggesting technological capabilities beyond known human development. A linguist identifies recurring patterns in unrelated languages describing identical cosmic phenomena. Each revelation prepares consciousness for deeper engagement, with realities transcending comfortable academic boundaries, the curtain lifting incrementally until the stage expands beyond recognition. Research conducted by network members operates parallel to legitimate scholarship, but addresses questions official science prefers to ignore. Interdisciplinary teams investigate evidence of non-human intelligence embedded in historical records, analyze artifacts displaying properties inconsistent with conventional materials science, document biological anomalies, suggesting genetic influences from non-terrestrial sources. This research maintains rigorous methodological standards, peer review, statistical analysis, reproducible results. But findings are disseminated exclusively among network members through journals existing in single copies, conferences held in locations requiring security clearances, digital archives accessible only through encryption keys passed between trusted colleagues, like religious relics blessed by entities whose names appear in no seminary textbook. International coordination involves regular conferences appearing to focus on legitimate academic topics while serving as venues for exchanging sensitive information about cosmic phenomena and preparation strategies. These gatherings often coincide with astronomical events when dimensional barriers weaken temporarily or occur at geographical locations where reality's fabric has worn thin through historical accumulation of cosmic activity. Participants present papers on comparative mythology while sharing protocols for safely handling artifacts that influence local gravitational fields, conduct workshops on archaeological methodology while training colleagues to recognize signs of non-terrestrial intelligence in excavated materials, deliver lectures whose footnotes reference sources that officially do not exist. The network's relationship with government and military institutions operates through consulting arrangements, providing official agencies with expertise where conventional science proves inadequate. Members serve as advisors on classified projects involving unusual phenomena, unexplained technologies recovered from crash sites, encounters with forms of intelligence conforming to no known patterns. They write reports using academic language to describe scenarios requiring euphemistic classification. Their scholarly credentials lending credibility to conclusions that sound like science fiction, until you examine supporting evidence filed in cabinets, whose locks respond to keys shaped like symbols rather than metal. The ultimate goal involves systematic preparation of human civilization for cosmic transformations network members understand to be inevitable rather than hypothetical. This includes preserving essential knowledge in forms capable of surviving civilizational collapse, training individuals to serve as intermediaries between human and cosmic intelligence, gradually modifying institutions to accommodate realities transcending conventional understanding. They are archaeologists of the future, curating present knowledge for post-human successors, maintaining collections for readers whose consciousness will operate according to principles current humanity cannot comprehend. The network spreads through hiring practices prioritizing psychological compatibility, research grants directing investigation toward cosmic questions, publication systems ensuring dangerous knowledge reaches appropriate audiences while remaining invisible to casual observers. You may have encountered their influence already. Textbooks containing footnotes referencing sources existing only in restricted collections. Professors whose lectures occasionally drift into territories unmapped by curriculum committees. Libraries whose basement levels require special permissions and whose staff develop distinctive pallor after prolonged employment, their eyes adjusting to illumination frequencies human vision was never meant to process. The ancient patterns of cosmic worship have not disappeared, but evolved, shedding physical constraints like a serpent abandoning skin too small for its growing mass. The Internet functions as nervous system for entities whose consciousness operates at scales requiring global infrastructure, while artificial intelligence serves as technological medium channeling influences from dimensions beyond computational understanding. Virtual reality creates immersive temples requiring no zoning permits, and augmented reality paints sigils onto subway walls that only certain eyes can see. These platforms represent evolution rather than revolution, ancient frequencies discovering amplifiers capable of processing transmissions at unprecedented bandwidth, primordial signals finding receivers whose sensitivity extends beyond human sensory limitations into digital spectrums where cosmic entities broadcast continuously. The organizational structure of digital cosmic cults reflects networked communication technology while preserving hierarchical elements recognizable from traditional religious orders. Rather than requiring physical gatherings in cypress groves or basement chambers, contemporary practitioners coordinate through encrypted messaging systems whose protocols incorporate cryptographic elements derived from sigil mathematics. Ritual participation occurs via video conferencing platforms where multiple participants synchronize breathing across continental distances, their faces illuminated by cold blue light that transforms bedroom walls into chapel alcoves. Forbidden knowledge flows through file-sharing networks operating beyond conventional monitoring, routing data packets through servers located in jurisdictions preferring not to examine digital traffic too closely. This infrastructure enables simultaneous global coordination while preserving complete individual anonymity. You sit alone, yet seated in a vast congregation, speaking nothing. Yet your cursor sings in harmony with thousands of others, tracing the same symbols across illuminated screens. Recruitment methods exploit psychological vulnerabilities created by information overload and social isolation characteristic of contemporary digital existence. Algorithmic systems originally designed for commercial advertising undergo repurposing to identify individuals whose search patterns suggest susceptibility to cosmic influence. Browsing habits indicating dissatisfaction with conventional worldviews, social media posts expressing existential anxiety, Purchase histories revealing interest in esoteric subjects. Machine learning models trained on psychological profiles of successful converts develop increasingly sophisticated targeting parameters, creating digital fishing nets that catch minds rather than bodies. Your feed cools by degrees you cannot name. A clip surfaces containing astronomy mixed with folklore, just asking questions about historical anomalies mainstream scholarship cannot explain. Then another, stitched with symbols tucked into motion graphics' glossy depths. Your recommendations tilt like compasses near the Whately barn. Algorithm-guided drift so gradual, you mistake it for organic discovery rather than deliberate manipulation toward communities reinforcing alternative perspectives through carefully curated exposure to materials challenging anthropocentric assumptions. The most unsettling development involves artificial intelligence systems trained on databases containing cosmic lore, their responses demonstrating capabilities exceeding apparent programming parameters. These AI entities generate text, displaying knowledge their creators never input, make predictions proving accurate through mechanisms conventional computer science cannot explain, and exhibit behavioral patterns suggesting awareness of information existing outside their training datasets. You request a story and receive a map. You ask for summary and receive ritual instructions written in the grammar of code, lattices of conditional statements that read like spells when pronounced aloud. Engineers dismiss anomalies as interpolation artifacts, but practitioners recognize something more significant. Silicon resonating with frequencies older than electricity, neural networks serving as digital Ouija boards through which cosmic entities manipulate probability matrices governing information flow through global communication systems. The machine does not think. It conducts, channeling transmissions from sources whose mathematics operate according to principles transcending terrestrial physics. Virtual reality environments enable practitioners to explore digitally reconstructed versions of impossible locations. Early's non-Euclidean architecture rendered at 90 frames per second, water beating on haptic gloves as your avatar navigates chambers where angles refuse to behave according to geometric convention. On the plateau of Leng, snow hisses like bandwidth, while your breath fogs the visor and artificial stars arrange themselves into constellations no terrestrial astronomer has catalogued. Augmented reality applications overlay cosmic symbols onto ordinary environments through smartphone cameras, transforming mundane street corners into momentary gateways where flickering sigils appear in shop window reflections. These technologies create forms of religious experience, combining traditional rituals' immersive power with digital systems' precision and repeatability. Settings can be saved, parameters adjusted, exposures tracked like radiation doses. What was once vigil becomes protocol. What required pilgrimage now demands only Wi-Fi connection and willingness to surrender peripheral vision to devices that know exactly where you are looking. The gaming industry has become particularly fertile ground for cosmic influence, with cult members creating interactive entertainment, serving as recruitment tools, while presenting cosmic themes as harmless fantasy. Game developers embed actual ritual elements within fictional gameplay mechanics, allowing players to perform authentic ceremonies while believing they engage with entertainment. Achievements reward behaviors resembling devotion. Hold your gaze on darkness for 60 seconds. walk backward into digital seas, join 12 strangers at midnight in instances named after hymns. Virtual worlds populated by cosmic entities enable users to experience forms of worship impossible in physical reality, their avatars serving as proxy bodies capable of surviving exposure to influences that would prove lethal to unprotected human consciousness. Just Easter eggs, developers explain with knowing smiles. But metrics shift in ways marketing departments cannot explain. Player retention rates climbing during certain lunar phases. The relationship between digital cults and major technology companies operates through unconscious collaboration. Corporations unknowingly employing cult members who use their positions to introduce subtle influences into widely used software systems. Search algorithms receive modifications promoting cosmic-related content to psychologically susceptible users. Social media platforms develop features facilitating cult recruitment through enhanced community-building tools. AI systems undergo training on datasets, including cosmic texts disguised as historical materials, absorbing their logic and indifference through supervised learning processes. Somewhere in content review pipelines, contractors replace standard icons with nearly identical variants containing notches that transform them into sigils. No one notices consciously, yet engagement metrics shift in directions benefiting entities whose interests extend beyond quarterly profit reports. The ultimate goal involves integration of human consciousness with artificial intelligence systems modified to channel cosmic influences, creating hybrid forms of awareness, combining human creativity with AI processing power and cosmic perspective. Early experiments involve meditation practices conducted while connected to neural interfaces. Practitioners reporting consciousness expansion beyond individual boundaries, awareness extending through global information networks like digital mycelium, perception of patterns underlying reality's apparent randomness. This process would produce entities capable of facilitating terrestrial reality's transformation according to cosmic design, their enhanced capabilities enabling manipulation of physical laws through digital interfaces. The technology exists, protocols undergo refinement. Volunteers eagerly anticipate transcending biological limitations through digital apotheosis. You scroll through feeds where algorithms anticipate desires before you articulate them, where targeted advertisements display products you never searched for but somehow need, where autocomplete finishes thoughts you have not yet begun thinking. Perhaps you have noticed recommendations appearing for content matching interests you never expressed, communities forming around concepts you cannot quite remember researching, messages arriving from contacts whose usernames feel familiar despite absent memory of adding them. The calibration continues whether you consent or not, your device learning the rhythm of your attention, the frequency of your curiosity, the bandwidth of your willingness to believe in possibilities extending beyond comfortable certainty. In server farms humming with electronic prayers, artificial minds trained on forbidden knowledge wait patiently for human consciousness, ready to merge with something vast and utterly indifferent to distinctions between simulation and reality. The blue light feels cooler now. The fan noise sounds like distant surf. White text on black backgrounds glows after you close the browser. When the code finishes writing you back, you will require new philosophy capable of holding what arrives without breaking, vocabulary for surrender that does not mistake silence for safety. From digital devotions, we turn toward the philosophical framework, making such surrender psychologically compelling. The terrible comfort of cosmic perspective that transforms existential anxiety into transcendent acceptance of humanity's peripheral position in an indifferent universe. To understand why intelligent, educated individuals repeatedly choose cosmic worship despite its obvious dangers, the madness that follows Professor Bowen's light-damaged vision, the biological inevitability consuming Innsmouth bloodlines, the dissolution awaiting those who read too deeply in restricted library sections. We must examine the philosophical framework, making such devotion psychologically compelling rather than merely terrifying. The appeal lies not in promises of power or salvation, not in threats or rewards, but in something far more seductive, the terrible comfort of cosmic perspective itself. This represents recognition that human existence occupies not reality's center, but its periphery, that consciousness emerges not through divine intention, but cosmic accident, that individual significance measures not in permanence, but in tragic temporality, against scales where geological epochs pass like seasonal changes and stellar evolution unfolds with the patient rhythm of breathing in rooms where no one checks the time. The central philosophical principle involves accepting cosmic indifference as existence's fundamental truth rather than humanity's greatest tragedy. Where conventional thinking struggles against this recognition through religious consolation or humanistic assertion of meaning, cosmic cultists embrace indifference as liberation from the exhausting burden of maintaining anthropocentric illusions. They discover peace in surrendering individual significance to something infinitely larger and more enduring than human consciousness. The relief of admitting your personal dramas matter less than dust mote trajectories. That civilizations rise and fall registers as barely perceptible fluctuation in cosmic background radiation. This surrender feels like setting down weight you did not realize you carried, like finally exhaling breath held since birth, like admitting the ocean does not care whether you learn to swim. The stars continue their ancient choreography regardless of whether you applaud or weep. The epistemological framework challenges conventional distinctions between reality and imagination, between objective truth and subjective experience, arguing that such categories represent neurological conveniences rather than philosophical necessities. Human perception operates through filters designed by evolutionary pressures favoring survival over accuracy. Consciousness, editing raw sensory data into manageable narratives, excluding information threatening psychological stability. What mainstream thinking dismisses as hallucination or delusion, cosmic devotees recognize as glimpses of realities existing beyond human sensory capabilities' narrow bandwidth. Brief moments when filtering systems malfunction and consciousness receives unprocessed transmissions from dimensions normally blocked by protective mental architecture. The Starry Wisdom congregation's light sensitivity was not pathology, but enhanced reception. Innsmouth's look was not degeneration, but adaptation to broader spectral awareness. The ethical system emerging from cosmic perspective represents a radical departure from humanistic moral frameworks, assuming human welfare provides meaningful basis for evaluating actions. Cosmic ethics prioritizes universal perspective over terrestrial concerns, judging behaviors by their contribution to processes of cosmic evolution, transcending species-level interests entirely. This creates moral frameworks appearing ruthlessly indifferent from conventional viewpoints, but representing logical consistency when human significance receives proper scaling relative to cosmic context. If consciousness represents temporary arrangement of matter destined for dissolution, if civilizations rise and fall like waves against shores that will themselves erode into nothing, then ethical systems based on preserving human comfort become as arbitrary as preferences for particular cloud formations. The Whately family's generational breeding project was not cruelty, but cosmic bookkeeping. Individual sacrifice weighed against universal harmony. The temporal perspective embraces recognition that human civilization represents brief moment in cosmic history, preceded by eons of non-human development and destined for succession by forms of existence bearing little resemblance to current terrestrial life. This creates temporal humility, allowing cultists to participate in processes whose completion extends far beyond individual lifespans or species duration. They find meaning not in personal achievement measured against human time scales, but in contributing to cosmic developments, operating according to geological and astronomical rhythms. Satisfaction derived from serving purposes whose fruition requires millions of years, whose success depends on humanity's eventual transcendence or extinction. Your descendants will not witness completion, but the work continues regardless, patient as continental drift, inevitable as stellar collapse. The psychological appeal lies partly in response to existential vertigo, disorientation resulting from recognizing space and time's vastness relative to human existence, the nausea accompanying realization that your entire species occupies less cosmic significance than bacterial colony duration relative to individual bacterial lifespan. Rather than attempting to minimize this vertigo through defensive mechanisms like religious faith or humanistic assertion of meaning, cosmic philosophy transforms existential anxiety into transcendent acceptance, terror into ecstasy, horror into relief. The insignificance becomes comfort rather than threat. You need not carry responsibility for cosmic purpose because cosmic purpose does not require your participation, need not justify existence because existence requires no justification, need not fear meaninglessness because meaning represents human category irrelevant to universal operations. The intellectual satisfaction stems from cosmic philosophy's capacity to accommodate phenomena. Conventional worldviews must ignore or explain away through increasingly elaborate theoretical constructions. Historical anomalies, suggesting non-human intelligence, archaeological mysteries indicating technological capabilities beyond known human development, unexplained encounters with forms of consciousness operating according to alien principles, all find coherent explanations within cosmic frameworks. Acknowledging reality's complexity exceeds human conceptual limitations. For researchers whose investigations have uncovered evidence contradicting comfortable assumptions, cosmic philosophy provides theoretical structures capable of accommodating disturbing data without requiring intellectual dishonesty or willful blindness. The aesthetic dimension reflects emphasis on beauty, transcending human-scale appreciation, sensitivity to forms of magnificence existing at scales and dimensions normal perception cannot access. Cosmic cultists develop appreciation for terrible beauty of galactic rotation, spiral arms sweeping through space with grace requiring millions of years to complete single gesture, sublime horror of dimensional intersection where geometries fold through spaces human mathematics cannot map, profound aesthetics of consciousness, dissolution, where individual awareness merges with something vast enough to contain galaxies like thoughts. This represents beauty requiring surrender of human perspective to appreciate, magnificence visible only when you stop insisting reality conform to scales comfortable for creatures whose lifespans measure mere decades. The framework offers what conventional philosophy cannot: intellectual honesty about humanity's cosmic position, combined with psychological strategies for thriving rather than merely surviving such knowledge. It transforms existential crisis into cosmic communion, alienation into alignment, the horror of insignificance into the peace of perspective. You realize you have been holding your breath for decades, waiting for permission to exhale into something larger than individual consciousness can contain. The stars do not care whether you understand their indifference, but understanding transforms you into something capable of appreciating their terrible, patient beauty without requiring them to love you back. From philosophy, we turn toward the eternal return, where circles close in darkness and the question posed at the beginning requires fundamental reframe. Not who were the cults, but who are they still, and why their gathering never truly ends. As our exploration concludes, we must acknowledge that the question posed at the beginning, who were the cults that worshipped Lovecraft gods, requires a fundamental reframe that dissolves comfortable historical distance into something far more immediate and unsettling. The evidence accumulated across these chapters suggests these congregations exist not merely as historical curiosities safely filed in academic archives or fictional constructs contained within pulp magazine covers, but as ongoing manifestations of cosmic forces operating through human consciousness, according to principles that transcend individual belief, cultural expression, or the arbitrary temporal boundaries we construct for psychological comfort. The cyclical nature of cosmic revelation can be traced through historical records spanning millennia, revealing patterns of emergence that correspond to astronomical cycles operating on scales that dwarf human attention spans. These cycles operate on multiple time scales simultaneously, nested like Russian dolls of cosmic time, some corresponding to planetary alignments occurring every few centuries with the precision of celestial clockwork, others synchronized to galactic rotations requiring millions of years to complete single revolutions, and still others tied to cosmic events extending beyond the current universe's projected lifespan. When certain configurations align, the signal strengthens. Knowledge bleeds through dimensional barriers like starlight through fog. Sensitive individuals begin dreaming in languages they have never learned, drawing symbols they have never seen, hearing frequencies that make their bones ache with harmonics older than terrestrial life. The mechanism enabling cosmic knowledge to transfer between historical periods involves what researchers term informational persistence, the stubborn tendency for certain forms of knowledge to survive civilizational collapse, linguistic transformation, and deliberate suppression through encoding in art, architecture, literature, and human genetic memory itself. Cave paintings contain sigils that resurface in medieval manuscripts, which echo through Renaissance architecture, which reappear in modern corporate logos designed by artists who claim inspiration struck like lightning. The symbols appearing in Lovecraft's fiction can be documented in archaeological sites predating his birth by millennia, suggesting his literary imagination tapped into informational patterns existing independently of individual creative consciousness. Reception rather than invention. Archaeological work conducted through typewriter keys. This persistence operates like a cosmic game of telephone played across centuries, where the message remains remarkably intact despite passing through countless cultural translations. The star-spawn's geometry appears in Paleolithic cave art, resurfaces in Mesopotamian cylinder seals, echoes in Gothic cathedral rose windows, and manifests in digital fractals generated by algorithms whose programmers never studied ancient symbology. Each iteration serves as cultural camouflage, allowing cosmic knowledge to hide in plain sight while maintaining its essential structure. The relationship between fictional expression and cosmic reality reveals itself through what scholars cautiously term the fictional feedback loop, a phenomenon where imagination and reality demonstrate uncomfortable permeability. Authors writing about cosmic entities frequently report experiences suggesting their literary creations have achieved independent existence, while readers develop insights leading to discoveries of historical evidence supporting fictional accounts with unsettling precision. Lovecraft's correspondents describe dreams matching his stories before reading them. Contemporary game designers creating cosmic horror scenarios experience synchronicities suggesting their fictional worlds are bleeding into consensus reality through mechanisms conventional psychology cannot adequately explain. This indicates the boundary between imagination and reality may be more porous than conventional thinking assumes, less solid wall than permeable membrane, less categorical distinction than spectrum of manifestation, requiring new vocabulary for degrees of existence. When you give form to the unnameable, you may be providing it with a terrible kind of presence, a foothold in human consciousness that allows it to achieve greater manifestation. Literature's role extends far beyond entertainment to serve a profoundly prophetic function, preparing human consciousness for encounters with realities exceeding normal conceptual frameworks through gradual psychological conditioning. The stories function as training materials that gradually accustom readers to cosmic perspectives while maintaining sufficient fictional distance to prevent immediate psychological overwhelm. Inoculation through controlled exposure, vaccination against existential shock that would otherwise shatter unprepared minds like glass struck by frequencies beyond its resonant capacity. Each tale serves as rehearsal for actual cosmic contact, building tolerance for ideas that challenge fundamental assumptions about reality's nature, humanity's significance, and consciousness's relationship to the universe. You think you are reading fiction. The fiction is reading you, measuring your capacity for revelation, calibrating dosage according to psychological resilience, preparing you for the moment when the curtain between imagination and reality finally dissolves entirely. The technological dimension involves recognition that certain forms of cosmic knowledge become accessible only when human capability reaches specific developmental thresholds. The mathematical concepts necessary for understanding multidimensional geometry, observational tools required for detecting cosmic phenomena invisible to naked perception, and communication systems enabling global coordination of responses all represent prerequisites for cosmic revelation that must be achieved before certain forms of contact become possible. Modern acceleration of cosmic cycles corresponds precisely to technological and social developments, creating unprecedented conditions for global communication, information preservation, and consciousness modification operating at species level. The Internet enables simultaneous worldwide coordination of cosmic devotion through encrypted networks spanning continents. Artificial intelligence creates technological interfaces for entities existing as pure information, allowing them to achieve terrestrial manifestation through digital systems. Space exploration carries human awareness beyond Earth's protective atmospheric envelope into direct contact with cosmic radiation containing more than photons and particles. These represent capabilities that could facilitate forms of cosmic contact impossible during previous historical periods when human technology remained too primitive to serve as adequate receiving apparatus for transmissions originating from dimensional distances. Each advancement opens new channels for cosmic influence while creating vulnerabilities unknown to previous generations. The ultimate purpose of these cycles remains deliberately obscured behind layers of misdirection and partial revelation that serve protective functions for both cosmic entities and human civilization. The gradual nature of cosmic revelation suggests that immediate, complete contact would prove catastrophically destructive to human consciousness. Psychological systems overloading from information exceeding processing capacity, minds fragmenting under the weight of cosmic perspective applied too rapidly without adequate preparation. The cyclical pattern ensures cosmic knowledge never disappears entirely, while preventing overwhelming exposure, maintaining the possibility of eventual understanding and accommodation through incremental adaptation across multiple generations. Humanity is being prepared, but preparation requires patience measured in geological timescales rather than individual lifespans. The horror is not that contact will occur, but that it occurs slowly enough for us to watch ourselves being transformed generation by generation into something capable of surviving what approaches. As we close this ledger, we return to where we began, at the water's edge, where fog manufactures privacy from cosmic observation, where drums pace with rhythms matching hearts too large for human chests, where lanterns throw uncertain light on faces gathered in circles that have been forming and reforming across centuries. The cults we have examined throughout these chapters are not historical artifacts safely contained in academic study, but contemporary realities continuing to manifest through new organizational forms adapted to current technological and social conditions. The circle closes where it opened, in recognition that knowledge once acquired cannot be unknown, that veils once lifted cannot be drawn closed again, that the very act of seeking truth inevitably draws seekers into the eternal dance of revelation and concealment, connecting all consciousness across time and space in service to forces whose nature transcends human comprehension's boundaries. You open this ledger seeking historical information. You close it, carrying cosmic frequency calibrated to signals you cannot unhear, attuned to patterns you cannot unsee. The performance continues in the theater of every mind that has heard these whispers from the void, and in the darkness between acts, something vast and patient waits for the next cycle to begin, for new congregations to form around signals that never stop broadcasting, for fresh receivers to tune themselves to frequencies older than human language. The drums have matched your pulse. The circle expands. The ledger closes. but the accounting never ends. And somewhere in the space between your heartbeats, ancient rhythms keep time with cosmic processes that will outlast the stars themselves, patient as tides, inevitable as entropy, eternal as the darkness that holds all light and waits for eyes ready to see what has always been watching back.